Hello and welcome back to Model Maker Dave's workshop. This video really is a wrap up of the sprue goo experimentation, fettling, buggering about, messing about with using sprue goo as a medium for making either replica parts or spare parts for kits. Now, for 1/72 and 1/76, I think it's something that you should really have a think about, because if you just want to do something like what I've got here, a little bit closer to the desk, right, that's better. What I've got here is some 76 scale jerry cans. Alright, there's a couple of air bubbles on it, but you could quickly run a little bit of filler in. You could even use them as dinks and dents, because these things would have been kicked around and thrown around when they're empty and no longer used. If you wanted to, you could probably even get away with suggesting that there might be a couple of bullet holes in them. So on that note, for something of this scale, I think it is a viable option to use because it's cheap. You've already got liquid poly. You've already got sprue because you're building a kit. It's kind of logical to mix the two together to make the goo and make it relatively thick, not what you would use for filling in holes or gaps, but use it as a thicker medium for casting. Now you can either use what I've used here, right, it's not the right one, but you can use this moulding compound to make your moulds, or you could, if like what I've got here, well, it's not the right one, but it's around somewhere. Oh, there it is. I've used this one that I cast for using when I was playing around with some resin. You can still use this, and when you do this or in there, put a little bit too much in, because you do get a little bit of shrinkage, and having this extra little bit of, for want of a better word, flash, when you come to lift it out the mould, it does help to pull it out. So, and that was the case with the small parts that I put on the GR1. Trying to extract them from this with just the goo in where it needed to be, yes, you can do it, but you are endangering that if you flick it too hard, you're giving it to the carpet muncher. So cast them, but cast them with a little bit of flash. It will help. Yeah, I know you've got to do a little bit of cleanup, but it's not the end of the world. It's not difficult. So moving on from what I did for the 72nd and 76th scales, I tried it with 1/48th, and to be fair, it did work, but it didn't work in that when I took them out of the moulds, I thought I'd given them enough time, but not really, because they were still not wet to the touch, but if you put a little bit of pressure on them, you would leave a slight indent, which you could use in your favour if you wanted to make the whatever it was that you was casting looking a bit dinked and dented, then yeah, you could use that part to your advantage. But moving up to the 35th scale 2-part mould that I created, that pretty much was a disaster, to be fair. I think it was a disaster of my own making. I put the sprue goo in, and I left it for, I think it was 48, maybe 36 hours, and thought, well, because the end of it was dry, the rest of it should be dry. And then when I pulled the mould apart, the first third of the jerry can that I was trying to copy was actually hard. It set properly, but the other 2/3 was nowhere near. It was just like a very gooey mess. So I think, in all honesty, probably should have left it for a week. May even have been leave it for 2 weeks to see if that would have eventually set inside the mould. And then you have to start thinking, well, why should I use sprue goo to make a 35th scale part and leave it in there for 2 weeks when I can use resin, I can use a bit of millipup, and it'll be done in a couple of hours. So I think sprue goo for anything bigger than 72nd or 76th scale, I think it's not worth it. If you're going to do 35th or 48th scale, you've got to be looking at resin, or you've got to be looking at using millipup. But for 72nd, 76, you probably even could do it for 144 if you're feeling adventurous. So I think that kind of wraps it up. It does work for the small stuff, but for the big stuff, yeah, my advice would be millipup or resin. So I think on that note, I will bring this exercise to its conclusion and say thank you very much for watching. And if you haven't done so, then please subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.